Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here to help you with waiver wire pickups before the season even starts. Look, maybe you got somebody you could stash on IR, you have an open spot, see somebody that maybe looks a little bit better. I'm gonna tell you about guys you might have missed on draft day that could be worth picking up right now before week 1. So let's get started at the running back position. So let's start with Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears. Now, this is a tricky one because, look, we've heard conflicting things all preseason about what that running game in Chicago is going to look like. We know they're going to need to run the ball a lot. That's not up for debate, right? Justin Fields still learning. Look, he has a lot of talent, but I don't think they're going to let him sit back and throw the ball 30 plus times every single game. They're going to have to keep it conservative, and they do have a couple of dependable running backs. But is it going to be all Monty like it was last year, where every game that David Montgomery was healthy, it was just him carrying the ball? Well, Khalil Herbert was good in spot duty, but you know what? As soon as Montgomery was back, we didn't see him. This is a new coaching staff, a different era, different philosophy. We've heard rumors about a committee. We've also heard maybe that Khalil Herbert fits this scheme a little bit better. Some people even thinking Herbert might take over the lead job. I'm not buying that, right? Montgomery's still the guy. Herbert will still be the backup, but he will see more work than he did last year. Here's the only problem is that Herbert, he's not a pass catching back. He hardly did it last year. He didn't really grade out too well, according to PFF, when he was used as a receiver. So that really lowers his floor in PPR leagues. But look, he could get some touchdowns, he could get some carries, and maybe if he is more effective than Montgomery, maybe he does eat into his work. So here's a guy who does have some upside as a running back who could be available on the waiver wire. All right, now what about Raheem Mostert? Look, you know that he can be effective when he's healthy. That's just the big thing. Can he actually stay healthy? Who knows? Look, you may not get a lot out of him, but for right now, if you need somebody for depth at the running back position, or if you're maybe in a really deep league and you're looking for a streamer, I think Mostert gets more work early in the season than people are being led to believe. It's going to be Chase Edmonds first. That is a fact. But Mostert might not be too far behind him. I mean, it could be almost like a 60-40 split even. They cut Sonny Michel, which means you know that the only thing they have Myles Gaskin there for is depth. And then Savon Ahmed, you don't have to worry about those guys getting on the field. It's going to be Edmonds and Mostert. Look, Mostert's the guy averages over 5 yards per carry. We know he can rip off big runs. He's got that upside, and I do think he'll be effective in this offense. Mike McDaniel is putting in, obviously, familiarity with him from San Francisco. How long will he stay healthy? Look, we can't predict that. So that's the thing. Obviously, you don't want to count on him long term, but it's not even week 1 yet. We're not looking down the road just yet. Obviously, if we thought he could be a stud all year, you would have drafted him. But Mostert could be effective the first couple of weeks. I think he's definitely worth taking a shot on if you have room and you need a running back for some depth. All right, and then here's some high upside stashes. Won't help you in week 1 if you're looking for a streamer. Sorry, I wouldn't start them. But let's talk about the Whites. And let's start with Chris's guy, Rachaad White. If you've watched any of our videos at all this preseason, you know how he feels. Rachaad White could be a league winner. Plenty of reasons for that. Look, Leonard Fournette, of course, is still going to be the workhorse there, but White should be involved as a pass catcher. I think he's going to take Gio Bernard's spot if Gio Bernard is even good to play. And White, of course, is probably one of the highest end handcuffs if Fournette does get hurt. So stashing Rachaad White could pay off huge. And then my guy, Zamir White, that would be Zeus, in Las Vegas. So you already know Josh Jacobs had his option declined. New coaching staff, new philosophy. Jacobs will be gone next year. So why not introduce Zamir White as the lead runner? I don't think it's going to happen really early in the season, but if he's more effective, it's not going to take very long. And you know what? They're going to start that transition by midseason anyways. Why not get ahead of the game and stash a guy like Zamir White right now? Now, I know there's some concerns about his pass catching. That's not really his strength. He can do it. It's not like he's incapable of catching the ball, but that's not really his thing. And they will have a guy in that role right now. I guess it's Amir Abdullah, who kind of has some value in PPR leagues. I'm not going to say that he's a guy you should go out and pick up just yet. But look, Zamir White will be the guy used near the goal line. He's going to be the lead runner, I predict, before long. And so I absolutely recommend stashing him if you have the room. Let's move on to wide receiver, and a guy that, it's hard to believe wasn't drafted, but of course, health is always an issue. Michael Gallup, towards ACL, coming off of that, not ready for week 1. But look, he was not placed on IR, and he is ready to come back potentially as early as week 2. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it is possible, all right? They're saying that if this were the playoffs, he could be out there. It's easy to buy too much into what the coaching staff and Jerry Jones says, maybe you shouldn't take that for much. But look, it sounds like he's not far off. If he misses a game, even if it's 2, big deal. This is a guy you don't need to roll out in your starting lineup in week 1, and you know that he could immediately become the number 2 target for Dak Prescott because they really didn't add anything else out there. Jalen Tolbert, I kind of like preseason, but honestly, we have not heard great things about him being ready. So it looks like Gallup could just resume that role as soon as he's healthy. So look, the upside here is tremendous. Absolutely worth stashing. Unfortunately, you can't stash him on IR, but if you have the space, I think he's probably the best wide receiver pickup out there. Staying in Texas, let's talk about Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. He should be the wide receiver number 2 behind Brandon Cooks in Houston. Obviously not the same kind of offense, not the same kind of level of talent necessarily, but Collins is a guy, look, he's got 6'4", so he's got some length, he's got the speed and the size, and he's made some impressive catches in the preseason and late last year. He's shown what he can do. He just needs the targets, and I think they will come. That's a very thin wide receiver core. Obviously, John Mechie, unfortunately, missing the season. They added Tyler Johnson, which is kind of interesting, but it's going to take him a while to integrate in that offense. There's really not a lot of depth. Philip Dorsett, maybe Chris Conley. I think Collins sees a lot more targets than people expect, and that connection with Davis Mills, they're growing. Don't forget the fact this is a new coaching staff, and so with Pep Hamilton now as the OC, we could see a little bit more life in this Houston offense. Another one of my preseason sleepers, one of my favorites, is Josh Palmer. We're hearing that he's going to get a lot more targets, and that's not just me saying it. That came from Justin Herbert himself. He's saying Josh Palmer will get a lot more targets this year. Okay, I don't think Herbert's the kind of guy who likes to mislead the media or just throw things out there, for attention. He doesn't do that. So I do believe Palmer will see more action. He started to see more action late last season. Of course, that's because Keenan Allen was hurt, and so he had to. But he was pretty good when he did get his chance. We know he's also got that big play, down the field ability. He wasn't as effective on those deep routes, like as Mike Williams was. Palmer's better off being used more in those intermediate routes. But still, we know that the red zone threat is there for him because this is a team that should be scoring a lot this year. And Keenan Allen is actually taking a slight step back. He's still a great receiver. He's just not as great as he used to be. I think they're going to work another receiver like Palmer in the mix more. So I do like his upside. And again, he's basically free. He wasn't drafted in many leagues, and he'll be out there floating on Waiverse most likely for you. Now let's talk about a rookie wide receiver. Might not be the one that you expect. Wan'Dale Robinson, and I'll admit I wasn't super high on him in the pre-draft process, and then going to the Giants did not make me any higher on him. But look at the state of the Giants wide receiver core right now. Kadarius Toney got a ton of talent. He just never seems to be fully healthy, and right now heading into week 1, he's not 100%. Sterling Shepard, definitely not ready for week 1, and even if he does come back, coming off an Achilles tear, what can we really expect from him this season? And then you have Colin Johnson now is out for the season. There's just, Kenny Golladay. How could I forget Kenny Golladay? Kenny Golladay, you can forget about Kenny Golladay. He's basically just, as they say, a mannequin out there, like a walking corpse in the football field. It's going to be Wan'Dale Robinson who leads this team in targets. I almost guarantee that's going to happen in week 1 because he has been the best player in camp. He's their most electrifying athlete outside of Toney. And look, he's drawn rave reviews. This is a new coaching staff. They selected him. They didn't sign Golladay, right? They didn't even pick Toney. They wanted Wan'Dale Robinson. I really feel he's going to be used a lot. And actually, his week 1 matchup makes me want to stream him because going against the Titans, who allowed the 3rd most receiving yards last year, and they just lost their leading pass rusher, this is a defense you want to put wide receivers against. I really think Wan'Dale Robinson could surprise in week 1, so maybe get ahead of the game and pick him up now before his big game. Staying in the NFC East once again, how about Curtis Samuel? Remember him? So this is a guy that was a trendy sleeper last year going to Washington, reunited with Ron Rivera, and then he basically didn't play hardly at all because of a groin issue that hampered him. Couldn't play throughout the first half of the season. Tried to come back, it just didn't work. So it was basically a lost season for him. We've heard good things, or at least, we haven't heard bad things yet this preseason. So it looks like he's good to go. And you know what? The thing is, not just being used as a receiver, he might actually get a lot more work in the backfield because Brian Robinson not available. If Antonio Gibson, continues to struggle or puts the ball on the ground, we could see Samuel basically be their RB2. JD McKissic, really more of just a pass catcher. He's not a guy they're going to feed the ball in the backfield. Samuel has experience rushing and receiving. I think he'll be used a lot more in that dual threat role, and we know he's super talented. So, you know what? I think Curtis Samuel is a guy that's being completely overlooked and slept on based on last year. Definitely worth a speculative add, or at least keep him on your watch list. Now at the tight end position, you know what? A lot of times you're better off waiting to see, who does get more targets. But look, I'm surprised Cole Kmet really isn't rostered in more leagues. Talk about tight ends who break out. Usually it's one of two things. Number one, they score a bunch of touchdowns, all right, double digits, or at least close. Or number two, they get a ton of targets. Usually that threshold is kind of 90 plus. And the reason that happens is because there's no good wide receiver 2 or 3 on that team. So let's talk about the Bears. Their number 2 receiver as of right now on the depth chart is Equanimeous St. Brown, and behind him is Byron Pringle. All right, so I think it's fair to say Cole Kmet might be the number 2 target on that team. He'll get a ton of targets. Remember, this is a guy who, of course, didn't score touchdowns at all last year, and so he has nowhere to go but up in that sense. He won't score double-digit touchdowns because I don't know that this whole team can support any player that scores double-digit touchdowns, even Mooney. But Kmet should see a ton of targets, a ton of receptions in full PPR leagues. I think he's got tremendous value. So surprised that he isn't at least a top 12 tight end in fantasy. A lot of people predicting a breakout for him. I'm kind of one of those. And the name you probably haven't thought about in a while is Hayden Hurst. He's now the starting tight end in Cincinnati. I don't need to convince you that that's a good landing spot for him. Obviously, he's got some touchdown upside, so I don't think he has any path to 90 plus targets. I do think he could score double-digit touchdowns for obvious reasons. When teams are worried about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, even Tyler Boyd across the middle, I think Hurst will be open quite a lot. So, and look, he's had a strong preseason, had a strong showing, good connection with Burrow already. Remember, this is a guy who was a former first-round pick. When the Baltimore Ravens picked tight ends a couple years ago, they took Mark Andrews 2 rounds after Hayden Hurst. He was their target. Very athletic, obviously natural pass catcher. He just hasn't really been in a good situation. He might be ready to finally put it all together. Finally, at quarterback, look, you probably shouldn't go into week 1 needing a quarterback, but maybe you want a good backup to stash because you didn't draft one. Or maybe you just like to play the streaming game at quarterback and you're looking for the best matchup, somebody who's out there. Why not Jameis Winston? Look, he goes against the Falcons in week 1. I think it's pretty obvious they can put up a lot of points on that defense. Look, Alvin Kamara is out there. Michael Thomas maybe will actually make it through a whole game. And then you got the additions of Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave. This will be a much different Saints offense than what we saw last year. Winston should be good to go. Doesn't seem like there's any limitations, even though he was injured last year. So Winston, we know, can sling the ball. This offense should have a pretty easy time in week 1. He's a guy I definitely like early in the season. And then also there's Matt Ryan, who's just under 50% rostered. Getting the Texans in week 1, that's maybe just as good as facing the Falcons. That defense will struggle all year. The only question is how many pass attempts will they really need to put up, because Jonathan Taylor could just run wild on them. But still, I like Ryan. I think he's going to be really strong season long. That's a guy you might want to hold because he's going to have a really solid floor throughout the year. All right, there it is, the very first set of waiver wire picks for the 2022 season. We appreciate all the love we've gotten from the Endgame community, guys. Check us out. Our live Start Sit show is on Saturday afternoon. It will be rocking. We're going to answer as many questions as possible. Join us for that. And if you want to guarantee you get all your questions answered, you can join us by becoming a patron. Information to that is in the link below. And you can join us on Sunday morning for an exclusive Start Sit show where we guarantee to answer every question you have. All right. Thanks for watching, and